The first thing I noticed was the silence on the radio. Channel 9, the dispatch frequency, is never quiet, not at 6 a.m. on a Monday. Not when we've got 412 trucks rolling across 26 states carrying everything from frozen chicken tenders to pharmaceutical-grade insulin. That'll go bad if the trailer drops below 32 degrees for more than 45 minutes. I'm Ray Callahan, 53 years old, and for the last 11 years I've been the Senior Logistics Systems Manager at Hargrove Freight Solutions out of Memphis, Tennessee. That's a fancy title for the guy who makes sure 412 trucks know where they're going, what they're carrying, and how to get there without killing the cargo, the driver, or the company's profit margins. When dispatch goes silent, it means one of two things. Either everything's running so perfectly that nobody needs help, which has happened exactly 0 times in my career, or the system's down and nobody can reach anybody. I had a real bad feeling it was the second one. Let me tell you something about freight logistics that most people don't understand. When you order something online and it shows up at your door 2 days later, you think it's magic. It's not magic. It's 1,000 moving pieces held together by software, diesel fuel, and guys like me who haven't slept a full night since Obama's first term. The routing system I built at Hargrove isn't some off-the-shelf solution you buy from a vendor and plug in. It's a living, breathing organism that I've been feeding and patching and rewiring for over a decade. Every truck has a GPS transponder that talks to our dispatch server every 90 seconds. The system calculates optimal routes based on delivery windows, traffic patterns, weather conditions, fuel prices at every truck stop along the way, and hours of service regulations that the DOT enforces like they're the 10 Commandments. Miss a delivery window for Kroger by 30 minutes? That's a $15,000 penalty. Let a driver exceed his 14-hour duty clock? That's a $16,000 fine per violation and a mark on our safety record that follows us for 3 years. Keep a trailer of frozen shrimp sitting on a loading dock in August because the routing algorithm sent the replacement truck to the wrong warehouse? That's $180,000 in spoiled product and a client we'll never see again. My system handles all of that. It's not pretty. It runs on a combination of custom SQL databases, proprietary APIs that connect to our clients' warehouse management systems, and about 60,000 lines of code that I've written, rewritten, and patched together like a quilt made by a man who learned to sew in the dark. But it works. It works every single day, 365 days a year, because freight doesn't take holidays, and neither do I. The trouble started 3 months ago when Hargrove got acquired by Meridian Capital Partners, a private equity firm out of New York that buys logistics companies the way some people buy shoes compulsively and without really thinking about whether they fit. Meridian sent in their operations director, a guy named Marcus Webb, to quote-unquote optimize our business. Marcus is 31 years old, wears those slim-fit suits with no socks and loafers, and says things like, leverage our synergies and drive operational alpha, without any apparent awareness that those phrases mean absolutely nothing. He's got an MBA from Wharton, which he mentions within the first 4 minutes of every conversation, and he's never been inside a truck cab, never loaded a 48-foot trailer in 100-degree heat, never had to explain to a driver named Big Earl why his route just changed for the 3rd time because a bridge in Arkansas is flooded. Marcus called me into his office on a Wednesday. He'd redecorated the space that used to belong to our old VP of operations, a woman named Janet Kowalski, who actually understood trucking and got pushed into early retirement the day Meridian took over. Now, the office had one of those standing desks, a monitor the size of a movie screen, and a plant that I'm pretty sure was fake. Ray, he said, barely looking up from his laptop. Big changes coming. We're bringing in a new fleet management platform, Synaptic Route. It's AI-powered, cloud-native, and it's going to transform how we do logistics. I sat down, even though there was no chair. I grabbed one from the hallway and dragged it in. What's Synaptic Route? Marcus turned his laptop around to show me a website with a lot of blue gradient backgrounds and stock photos of trucks that were clearly European because the cabs looked wrong. It's a startup out of Austin. My buddy Chad runs it. They've built an AI-driven routing engine that can replace your entire legacy system. Real-time optimization, predictive analytics, autonomous dispatch, the whole package, his buddy Chad. That was the first red flag. The second was that I'd never heard of Synaptic Route, and I know every major logistics platform on the market because it's literally my job. How many trucks is their biggest deployment? I asked. Marcus scrolled through the website. It says here they've handled fleets of up to 50 vehicles. 50. We run 412. That's like testing a canoe on a pond and then taking it into the Atlantic during hurricane season. It scales, Marcus said, with the confidence of a man who has never had to make anything scale. Chad assured me. The AI learns as it goes. The AI learns as it goes. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second. The system that's supposed to route $2, 3 million worth of cargo per day across 26 states is going to learn as it goes. That's like saying the pilot of your cross-country flight is going to figure out how to land while you're in the air. Marcus, I said, keeping my voice steady, our routing system handles DOT compliance for every state we operate in. Hours of service rules, ELD mandate integration, hazmat routing restrictions we carry, Class 3 flammables and Class 8 corrosives that legally cannot travel through certain tunnels, across certain bridges, or within 2 miles of certain water treatment facilities. Does Synaptic Route handle hazmat routing compliance? Marcus stared at me for a second. It handles routing. I'm sure hazmat is part of that. I'm sure hazmat is part of that. Those 8 words told me everything I needed to know. This man was about to bet the entire company on a system built by his frat buddy's startup that had never handled a fleet our size, probably had no hazmat compliance module, and was going to learn as it goes. But here's the thing, Marcus didn't want my opinion. He wanted my resignation. 3 days later, HR sent me a calendar invite for a meeting titled Organizational Realignment Discussion. I knew what that meant. I'd been in this industry long enough to speak fluent corporate euphemism. The meeting was short. Marcus, the HR director Denise Worthington, and a 26-year-old kid named Tyler Price, who Marcus introduced as our new director of logistics technology. Tyler had graduated from some coding boot camp 8 months ago, worked at Chad's startup for 6 months, and was now apparently qualified to replace a guy who'd been doing this for 11 years. Tyler's going to be managing the migration to Synaptic Route, Marcus said. We'll need you to hand over all system access and documentation by Friday. Friday. Today was Tuesday. They wanted me to hand over a decade of institutional knowledge in 3 days. You realize, I said, that our biggest client, Morrison Foods, has a 138 truck-dedicated fleet contract with us. Their delivery windows are measured in 15-minute increments. If we miss a window at one of their distribution centers, they don't just fine us, they have the contractual right to terminate and sue for damages. My system has hit 99.2% on-time delivery for Morrison for 7 straight years. Synaptic Route's AI will handle it, Tyler said, not looking up from his phone. It's got machine learning models trained on millions of data points. Millions of data points from where? I asked. Tyler glanced at Marcus like he wasn't sure he was allowed to answer. Simulated environments, mostly, but the models are extremely robust. Simulated environments. He'd trained his AI on fake data and was about to unleash it on real trucks carrying real cargo worth real money. This was going to be spectacular, and not in a good way. I spent Wednesday and Thursday doing what they asked, documenting everything I could. But here's the reality of complex systems that have evolved over 11 years. You can't write down instinct. You can't document the fact that Morrison's warehouse in Charlotte has a loading dock supervisor named Dwayne, who always marks trucks as late if they arrive during his lunch break. Even if they're on time, so you have to route Charlotte deliveries to arrive before 11:30 or after 1:15. You can't explain in a manual that our driver, Jimmy Ackerman, has a medical exemption that limits his driving hours to 10 instead of 11, but the exemption expired and got renewed with different terms last March, and the ELD system still shows the old limit. So you have to manually override it every Monday morning, or he gets flagged for a violation he's not committing. Tyler shadowed me for those 2 days. He asked questions that revealed he didn't understand the basics. What's a bill of lading? He asked at one point. I'm not joking. The kid was supposed to run logistics for a $340 million freight company, and he didn't know what a bill of lading was. That's like hiring a chef who asks what an oven is. Friday came. I packed my coffee mug, the photo of my daughter's wedding, and the stress ball shaped like a truck that my team had given me as a joke 5 years ago. I shook hands with the dispatchers, the dock supervisors, the drivers who happened to be in the yard. Big Earl grabbed me in a bear hug that nearly cracked my ribs. You sure about this, Ray? They're gonna run this place into the ground without you. Not my circus anymore, Earl. Take care of yourself. I drove home on I-40, listening to Tom Petty, and trying to figure out if what I was feeling was anger, relief, or the particular numbness that comes from watching someone make a catastrophic mistake and being powerless to stop it. Probably all 3. The first call came Saturday morning. My buddy Rick in dispatch texted me. Synaptic Route went live at midnight. System just routed a truck carrying frozen insulin through the Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado. Hazmat Class 9. Restricted route. Driver caught it and refused. Tyler told him to just go around. Just go around. The Eisenhower Tunnel sits at 11,158 feet in the Rocky Mountains. Going around means adding 6 hours and a mountain pass that's closed half the year. The insulin had a 4-hour delivery window. By Monday morning, my phone looked like a newsreel of a slow-motion apocalypse. The AI routing system had been live for 60 hours, and it had already created what I can only describe as logistical anarchy. First, it routed 14 trucks carrying Morrison Foods frozen chicken to their Nashville distribution center. Morrison's Nashville DC handles dry goods. Their frozen facility is in Murfreesboro, 30 miles south. 14 truckloads of chicken sat on a loading dock with no refrigerated bay for 3 hours. By the time someone figured it out, the internal temperature of the trailers had risen past the food safety threshold. $2.1 million in product, destroyed. Then the AI decided to optimize the fleet by reassigning drivers mid-route. Drivers who were headed to Phoenix got redirected to Portland. Drivers scheduled for local runs in Memphis got sent to Florida. The system didn't account for hours of service regulations, so it was telling guys who'd already been driving for 10 hours to take on 12-hour runs. When the drivers refused because, federal law, the system flagged them as non-compliant and locked them out of the dispatch portal. By Tuesday, we had 167 trucks sitting idle because their drivers were locked out of the system, and Tyler couldn't figure out how to override it. He called Chad in Austin. Chad said it was a known issue, and they were working on a patch. A known issue. In a system that was managing a $340 million freight operation. That's like finding out the brakes on your car are a known issue after you've already started down the mountain. The Morrison Foods disaster got worse. Their VP of supply chain, a terrifying woman named Catherine Park, called Marcus directly. I know this because Rick forwarded me the internal email Marcus sent afterward, which was essentially 4 paragraphs of panic disguised as corporate communication. Morrison was threatening to invoke the termination clause in our contract, a $47 million dedicated fleet agreement that represented roughly 14% of Hargrove's annual revenue. Wednesday brought the DOT into the picture. Turns out Synaptic Route's AI-driven compliance module had been generating fraudulent electronic logging device records. Not intentionally, the system just didn't understand how ELD data worked, so it was backfilling gaps with fabricated hours. When the DOT pulled our records for a random audit on 3 trucks in New Mexico, they found driving logs that showed the same driver in 2 different states at the same time. That's not a glitch. That's federal fraud. And it carries penalties of up to $16,000 per violation per day. The DOT opened a formal investigation. FMCSA flagged our carrier rating for review. Insurance companies started calling, asking questions about our system migration and whether it affected our risk profile. When your insurance company starts asking questions, it means they're looking for a reason to raise your premiums or drop you entirely. Thursday morning, I was sitting on my back porch drinking coffee and watching the squirrels fight over the bird feeder when my phone rang. It was Marcus Webb, and he sounded like a man who just realized the building he was standing in was on fire. Ray. His voice was hoarse. I need you to come in. Morning, Marcus. I saw on the news that Morrison pulled their fleet contract. That's gotta sting. Listen, I know this transition has been there were unforeseen. Marcus. Take a breath. He took a breath. It didn't seem to help. The DOT is threatening to shut down our interstate operations. Morrison's gone. Cisco is threatening to leave. We've got 108 drivers who haven't been paid because the new system can't process payroll exports correctly. The fuel card integration is down, so guys are paying for diesel out of pocket. I've got a driver in Oklahoma who's been sitting at a Love's truck stop for 36 hours because the system won't generate his dispatch order, and Tyler can't figure out why. Sounds like quite a week. Will you come back? Consulting basis. Whatever you want. I'd been thinking about this moment since Friday. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to let them burn. But then I thought about the drivers. Big Earl, with his daughter's college tuition coming due. Jimmy Ackerman, who sends money to his mom in a nursing home every week. 412 drivers who didn't create this mess but were paying for it. $85,000? I said. Retainer, non-refundable, wired to my account before I walk through the door. Plus a new 2-year contract at double my previous salary with a clause that says no system changes can be made without my written approval. Done. I'm not finished. Tyler goes. Today. I don't care where, send him back to Chad's startup, send him to business school, send him to the moon. I don't work with people who don't know what a bill of lading is. And I want a written letter from Meridian Capital's managing partner acknowledging that this disaster was caused by their decision to replace a functioning system with an untested platform. Long silence. You're asking me to admit we screwed up. In writing, Marcus, you've got 108 drivers who haven't been paid, a federal investigation into falsified driving logs, and your biggest client just walked out the door. I think the screwing up part is pretty well established. The question is whether you want me to fix it or whether you want to explain to Meridian's investors why a $340 million company is about to lose its operating authority. He agreed to everything in under 30 seconds. I showed up Friday morning at 6 a.m. The parking lot was half empty because a third of our drivers had gone home or were still stranded at truck stops across the country. Rick met me at the door with a coffee and a look of pure relief. "I've never been so happy to see anybody in my life," he said. The dispatch floor looked like a war zone. Phones ringing non-stop, whiteboards covered in scribbled roots, and Tyler's abandoned desk with 3 monitors all showing the Synaptic Route dashboard, which was displaying a cheerful message that said, "Optimizing your fleet," above a spinning loading icon that had apparently been spinning for 19 hours straight. First thing I did was kill Synaptic Route. Just unplugged it. Metaphorically and literally, I disconnected the API, revoked the access tokens, and shut down the cloud integration. Tyler had never bothered to disconnect my legacy system because he didn't know where it lived. It was still there, on the same servers, untouched. Like a faithful dog waiting for its owner to come home, I brought my system back online in 40 minutes. The routing engine spun up, recognized that 412 trucks were scattered across the country in positions that made no logical sense, and started calculating recovery routes. I spent the next 14 hours at my desk, manually reassigning every truck, checking every driver's HOS status against reality instead of the fabricated logs Synaptic Route had created, and rebuilding the Morrison delivery schedule not because Morrison was coming back, but because Cisco used a similar routing template and I needed to prove our system was functional before they pulled the plug too. By Saturday afternoon, every driver had a valid dispatch order. Fuel cards were reactivated, payroll exports were corrected and sent to accounting for emergency processing. I personally called the DOT investigator in Albuquerque, a no-nonsense woman named Agent Rivera, and walked her through exactly what had happened, showed her the fabricated ELD records, demonstrated that they were generated by a third-party AI system that had since been disconnected, and provided clean logs from my original system proving our actual compliance history. She wasn't happy, but she was fair. The investigation would continue, but she recommended against an immediate shutdown order. Cisco stayed. The DOT downgraded their investigation from imminent hazard to compliance review. The 108 drivers got their back pay by the following Wednesday, with a bonus for the inconvenience. The Morrison contract was gone. That one hurt. $47 million a year, and Catherine Park wasn't the forgiving type. Marcus tried calling her. She didn't pick up. She did send an email, though. 3 sentences. I heard Marcus read it out loud in his office, and even through the closed door I could hear the defeat in his voice. 3 weeks later, Marcus was reassigned to another Meridian portfolio company. Rumor has it he's optimizing a chain of car washes in New Jersey. Tyler went back to Austin. I heard Chad's startup lost 2 other clients after our disaster made the rounds in the industry. Turns out when a logistics platform causes a federal investigation, word travels fast. Faster than Synaptic Route could route a truck, that's for sure. I got my corner office. Nothing fancy, same building, same floor, but it's got a window that overlooks the truck yard. And every morning I can watch the rigs roll out, lights on, diesel rumbling, headed in the right direction because the system that tells them where to go was built by someone who understands that behind every data point is a real person with a family and a mortgage and a kid who needs braces. Rick stopped by my office last Friday with a gift. It was a stress ball shaped like a truck, just like my old one, but this one had writing on it. It said, "Route Master, do not replace." I put it on my desk next to the coffee mug and leaned back in my chair. Through the window, I could see Big Earl's rig pulling out of the yard, right on schedule, headed for Charlotte. He'd make Dwayne's loading dock well before lunch, because the system knew to get him there by 11:15. Some things you can't teach an algorithm. Some things you can only learn by being there, day after day, solving problems that don't exist in simulated environments, building workarounds for a world that doesn't run on clean data and perfect conditions. You can throw all the AI and machine learning and cloud-native buzzwords you want at a problem. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to know that Dwayne takes his lunch at 11:30, and Jimmy's exemption changed last March, and the Eisenhower Tunnel is closed to hazmat. Somebody's got to care enough to remember. I poured some coffee and raised the mug toward the window where the trucks were rolling. Here's to the guys who keep it moving, and here's to the people smart enough not to fix what isn't broken. That's worth getting up early for.